Good evening po, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Pilipinas, Attitude Pa, an original programming brought to you by 3 p.m. Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, Pilipinas muna. Gandang gabi po sa lahat. Kanina po, nangyari na po ang last Sona ng ating Pangulo, si Pangulong Rodrigo Roa Duterte. It was longer than the usual Sona is ever done. It was almost 3 hours. It was almost long hours. And marami naman po siyang pinunto na, because kagaya po ng Sona, hindi po ba sinasabi po dyan yung mga achievements ng kanyang administration, sinasabi yung mga balak pa niyang gawin sa mga darating na panahon. But now the president only has like a year more to do more in his administration. And tonight po, makakasama po natin ang isang panauhin na nakasama po natin dati na upang pag-usapan po natin ang Sona, kung bakit kailangan ng Sona and everything like that. At para mas maliwanagan din po tayo sa mga kapaki-pakinabang na bagay sa pagbibigay ng Sona. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on Pilipinas, Attitude Pa, Dr. Clarita Carlos.
Hi, good evening, Peter. Thank you for inviting me.
How are you tonight, ma'am? How are you tonight?
I'm okay.
That's good to know.
After so many days of continuous rain, so mercifully the sun came out. Yeah.
I understand you came from Tagaytay, ma'am. Yung pa yung bawi nyo ng ilang araw tayong inulan?
Well, no. This family affair of about 6 people, my daughter, my granddaughter, and my great-granddaughter, that has been planned long before, but we in fact thought it will be aborted because of the inclement weather, but fortunately the sun came out this morning, so I went
Yes,
out.
it did.
Yes, I had just come back, in fact.
Ma'am, do you drive?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
In all of my 75 years of life, I've been a passenger all the time.
Oh, that's good. Ma'am, kanina po, I understand hindi po kayo masyado nakanood dahil galing kayo sa celebration ng birthday ng apo ninyo. Tama po ba, ma'am?
Yeah, plus where we were, which is a nature sanctuary, the reception was very bad. I had to go to one corner of the restaurant So I got
Uh,
just bits and pieces. So I hope you don't mind, Peter, if you preface your question with what had been declared. So I will just react to it because
yes, ma'am.
really,
Yes, ma'am.
I just got snippets of what was said, along the way. Yeah, and that's
Yes, ma'am.
really that's really the bottom line. Yeah.
Kasi po kanina ma'am, kasi sa SMNI channel po ako nanood, meron silang pre-program prior to the Sona proper. Pinakita po doon na dumating ang Pangulo, pinaglakad siya ng mahaba papunta sa stage and all. He almost stumbled nga at one point. But he managed to catch himself. Kanina po, ma'am, nung sa simula po ng kanyang speech, binati niya lahat ng nandoon, the Senate President, the House Speaker, the Vice President, and everyone who is present, who were present in the in the Sona. Ang huli niya pong binate ang kanyang asawa and called her his wife. Of course, everybody knows that Madam Hanilet is his long-term partner. I'm sure, sa tingin mo ba, Mama, makakatch ba ng intriga yung pagtawag niya ng wife sa kanyang partner?
Well, I'm glad he finally used that term because, as I understand, he is really divorced from his first wife, and
Mhm.
this is really his present wife now. He should have used that term a long time ago.
So we actually have a first lady.
Yes, except that she had the decency, to remain in the background, and I
Yeah.
like that. And I like that.
Yeah. Actually, ma'am, hindi ko naman siya na kamayan, pero nakita ko siya when I attended yung isang event sa Camp Krame called A Life After Tokhang. Ito po yung mga ilang daan na po yung sumurrender na mga users and pushers. Tapos meron po nung programa. Siya po ang natalang speaker nung araw na yon, si Madam Hanilet. And then when she was speaking, she got very emotional because of the attacks that the president were getting from the people. And she got very emotional and she actually cried during her speech and saying sana lang na lang daw hindi na tumakbo si PRRD at nanatili na lang sa Davao, it would have been easier for everybody. And tama po kayo she maintained her distance from the limelight. She maintained her distance from the limelight. Ngayon po ma'am, kanina po during the speech of the president, one thing that caught my attention po kasi di ba tama po ba ako ma'am? Ang SONA sinasabi diyan di ba po ang achievement ng administrasyon, ang mga nagawa ng kanyang pamumuno at ang mga isakatuparan ng mga polisiya. Ma'am, what is the importance of SONA po when it comes to for a president and for the nation?
Well, actually, the State of the Nation address, I really don't know when that started. I'm sure we copied it again from the United States of America, who was our colonizer for 50 years, and including, of course, the many things that we copied from their constitution. It is really a report to the 110 million Filipinos who are not privy to what is happening in government. So it can either be report in broad strokes, sometimes you don't even have numbers there, because you assume that the public, in fact, knows what the government is doing on a day-to-day basis. Or it can be, as you had noted quite well, a 3-hour tirade or a 3-hour peroration, many of which parts I listened to, where the nitty-gritty were included. Numbers, percentages, side remarks, and so on. And it was very, very tedious for the public to listen to a 3-hour continuous presentation like that. And I would imagine that some of them you know how it is. You need infinite patience to be able to stay for 3 hours. You know,
Mm.
some of them I would imagine skip some parts because they knew already what was going to be said. Meaning, there was nothing monumental that stuck in my mind among the snippets that I heard tonight.
Mhm. Okay. Ma'am, do'n po kasi sinabi niyo po na mga maliliit lang po ang mga napanood ninyo. Dito ngayon po, dito po sa mga nabanggit na pangulo, ang isa po sa kanyang mga binanggit, ah, is one thing, his office, he said that he had a pure and unpolluted want to serve the Filipino people. Did you hear that, ma'am?
Well, this is not the first time he said that, and
Mhm, mhm.
I believe him. Unfortunately, that statement also carries a lot of naivete about what is going on in our politics because
Mhm,
it takes more than just a pure heart to help people to get things done.
mhm.
I think, Peter, there was one part which I really listened to intently, and that's in regard to corruption. Of
Yes,
course, he
yes,
again said that no one can end corruption, which I
yes.
disagree with because corruption has been ended in one of our neighboring countries and is close to being ended in many other economies and states. And I doubt very much that martial law is the only answer, to compel
Mhm,
people to act in a certain way because having served in government also for 3.5 years, corruption can be stopped, eradicated, as a matter of fact, if you only have the proper sanctions mechanisms in place, meaning you
mhm.
make it very, very painful for anyone to steal. And this is where I differ with him.
Okay. Ma'am, diyan po sa corruption na 'yan, of course, yun po rin ang naiisip ko kanina habang nanonood ako when I was listening to him. And I said, is it really that difficult? Is it, of course, in our country, I don't know, ma'am, corruption parang has become a culture. Para naging parte na natin yung corruption that anywhere you go, naririnig mo na kailangan mo magbayad ng ganito. Sa negosyo po ng pamilya namin, we refuse to work with the government because we always hear that we have to do the SOP, we have to give the SOP and like that. It's like one of my dreams po kasi ma'am talaga of having the kind of business that we have is that we wouldn't be hearing anything about SOP anymore and we just go on with doing business with the government because it is as an honor for a company to work with the government, hindi po ba? Dapat po ganun po ang mindset natin. But it discourages us, our company, to work with the government because of this corruption, because of SOP that we hear all the time. And then, sinasabi, whenever I ask, kalakaran na raw yan, ma'am. So, ano kaya, ma'am, ang magandang paraan para ma-eradicate natin yan? Kasi sinabi nyo sa neighboring country natin, na-eradicate na nila eh.
Well, siguro, if there is one single critical and maybe even a predictor factor which we can identify, it would be the bureaucracy. If you
Mhm.
look at the bureaucracy, Peter, you will notice that we have a proliferation of so many, many agencies of government. As a matter of fact, you still have certain other departments which are in threatening to be created. Some of them are useful, some of them are not, and therefore the bureaucracy has become like a hydra already. And this is contained in my book. In fact, this is my favorite topic, where you see the very serious overlaps, the duplications in work, and the most serious one is the unclear lines of authority. I'll
Mm.
just give you an example. I don't know if we gave this in our interview last time. If you look at the Office of Transport Security that was created by an EO at the behest of the Americans after 9/11,
Mhm.
okay? If you look at the CAAP, Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines, if you examine the basis of their mandate, one is an executive order, the other is a Republic Act, you will
Mhm.
notice the appearance of two words, aviation security. Okay, when two words appear in two legal documents, I'm sure, Peter, you know what the problem looks like. Agawan
Uh-huh.
ng kaninong mandato ang aviation security. And we were fortunate to be engaged by the CAAP and also by the OTS sequentially. First by the CAAP and then the OTS. And so when we engaged with the OTS, we knew already what the problem looks like because we
Uh-huh.
had already dug up, the horror stories of the CAAP. But are they being addressed right now? No. I just gave you one example, Peter. I can give you
Uh-huh.
10,000
I
examples
know, ma'am.
of
Mhm.
cases where because of unclear lines of authority, I'm sure, I don't know if you've heard yung nagbarilan pa sila diyan sa Terminal 1 kasi nag-agawan sila kung sino yung may mandato na mangialam ng krimen sa loob ng airport. And we discovered, when we investigated this, kami pa ni Roy Logoles noon ano siya
Mm.
national security advisor, for Diyos por Santo, yung mga taong nandun, Peter, hindi nila alam ang kanilang respective mandates. Kaya akala nung isa,
Mhm.
kami talaga ditong gawa namin. So, siyempre, nagbungguan sila. Can you imagine, you are in the same geography, hindi mo rin alam. That is how serious the problem is. To go back to your question, bakit it's a long-winded answer. The reason why you have corruption is because at every point of government work, you have introduced the human being. Whenever you have human intervention, there is a likelihood that somebody is going to take advantage of that intervention, either to withhold it or to give it for so many zeros of pesos. So do you
Mhm.
see? So
Yes, ma'am.
bureaucracy is the pivotal concept here and really is the answer. And except for President Marcos, no one president has tried that to reform the bureaucracy.
So, ma'am, since the president, I'm sure you are very abreast with his activities. Have you ever seen him at least give a good try about the bureaucracy that's happening right now in our government?
Yes, to be fair, he really attempted to do what he thought was best. I'm sure you've heard of the PACC, you've heard
Mm.
of the ARTA, you have heard of ease of doing business. These are bits and pieces of, it's a big picture, Peter. You
Mhm.
can't be doing this thing in bits and pieces because, like a puzzle, there will be parts which will be empty. And you have empty parts because you have not looked at the bureaucracy in its holistic perspective. Hahabulin mo yung mga streamlining of processes. Bago mo ma-streamline ang process, pakialaman mo muna yung mandato. I-re-engineer mo. Kasi kung hindi mo
Mm.
re-engineer yung Office of Transport Security at CAAP, ano naman yung katuturan na pinabilis mo ang isang proseso? Yun ang ibig sabihin ng streamlining. That's the reason why
Mhm.
streamlining should not be the main concern. The main concern is re-engineering because you're addressing conflicts in the mandates of so many agencies. Nag-aagawan ng mandato eh. And the sad part about that, I'm sure there are so many stupid lawyers who had read this, 10,000 of them, hindi nila nakita. Hindi nga ako lawyer, Peter. Pero syempre, dahil
Mhm.
kinangkal namin to, nakita namin, oo nga, bakit sa dalawang legal document, yung pala nga, yung sa example ko,
Mhm. Mhm.
nakita mo na talaga yung binigyan mo ng mandato, yung dalawa, yung isa EO, yung isa RA. Pero pareho yung force of law niyan, di ba?
Uh-huh. So, di ba, ma'am, ang RA ang mas matimbang kesa sa EO. Tama po ba ako?
Tama ka, no? Yun din ang
Oho.
una kong salvo diyan sa kaap. Sabi ko,
Oho.
kayo yung RA eh. Alam mo, ang tagal ipalabasin yung kaap, RA, Republic Act na yan. Nalimutan ko na kung anong number. Ang
Mhm.
EO, kanya minadali ni Arroyo dahil nagmamadali ang Amerikano at mahirap siyempre, hindi ba? Talagang you're like pulling teeth pag pinadaan mo pa yan sa Congress at malamang baka
Mm.
hindi palampasin dahil haharangin ng whatever. The quickest way to
Mm.
do that is to make sure na may legal mandate ang presidente and may prerogative to sign an EO. That's why the
Okay.
OTS is an EO. Pero in terms of enforcement, you can see may budget ang OTS, may budget ang CAAP, pareho rin, no? Pareho rin ang
Uh-huh.
kanilang enforcement capability.
So, ma'am, nandiyan kasi 'di ba pag Republic Act ka, meron kang sagaa, may nakukuha kang budget. Kumbaga may fixed budget ka every year na ibinibigay ng Senado na through DBM, di po ba? Yung EO po ba, ganun din? Meron din siyang fixed budget?
Yeah, ang OTS meron siyang fixed budget. Nasa ano siya, pangangalaga siya ng DOTR, di ba? Isa siya sa attached agency ng DOTR, katulad din ng CAAP. Isa pa yung mga attach. Alam mo, yung pinaka-abuse word na yan, yung attach na yan eh. Hindi mo alam kung gaano ka-attach. Kasi yung CAAP ang sasabi, por Diyos, por Santo. Ba't naman kami pinapakialaman nito? Ito may mandato kami, Republic Act. And sa kanila ay talagang may gravitas yung having a Republic Act. But that's just the case. I'll give you another example just to show you the egregious collision or unfair lines of authority. I'm sure you've heard of the DPWH and you've heard of the DOTR. Parehong department. Okay? I'm sure nakikita mo yung dalawang gwapo na head ng dalawang agency niyan. Palagay mo sino may mandato sa pagdisenyo ng architecture ng ating transport? DOTR, di ba? Kalkalin mo kung nasa ano ang mandato ng DPWH na siyang gumagawa din ng disenyo. Ang mandato ng DPWH ay mag-implement ng ginawang litrato o drawing ng DOTR. I'm sure on the ground, hindi mo nakikita yan. In fact, pati ikaw naguguluhan ka, sino ba dito sa dalawa nito ang dapat sundin? Kasi itong isa nagagawa din ng bridge ng daan, at yung isa nagagawa din ng bridge at ng daan din, 'di ba? Collision na naman, bungguan na naman 'yan. Mercifully, itong dalawa nito are gentlemen and hindi pa naman sila nagbubungguan.
Hindi pa naman po.
Palagi ko ding tinatanong kasi we were also engaged by the DOTR at tinulong namin gumawa yung roadmap to 2050. Sabi ko, let us bring in DPWH because I want to tell the head of the DPWH na hindi siya pwedeng mag-intrude dun sa function ng DOTR. Ang verb niya is implement. Wala siyang initiative na, but I'm sure alam mong hindi ito nangyayari. Okay, do you see how the overlaps are really
it's happening.
Not only lead to siguro wastage ng salapi, di ba? Yung plano hindi nagtatagni-tagni. And pag yung plano ganyan hindi nagtatagni-tagni, ay yung salapi mo talaga masasayang, di ba? Another aspect of corruption.
Ma'am, speaking of DPWH, so big factor pala kayo sa pagkakaintindihan ng dalawang ahensya, ng DOTR at ng DPWH. Thank you very much for that, ma'am. Ngayon po, binanggit ng Presidente ang kanyang bill. Kasi po nakikita naman natin na there are 5,700 bridges or 5,900 bridges, I'm not sure about the exact figure, na tumayo sa ating all over the nation. Yun pong ganong klaseng initiative ng Pangulo, ma'am. Ano po masasabi ninyo dito? Will this really help our economy?
Yes. Kasi nga itong roadmap namin to 2050, tatamaan niya lahat ng sectors, di ba? Aviation, roads, aviation, yung maritime, no? Lahat, all kinds of transport, papakialaman niya. Ang hindi pa nga lang niya pinapakailaman yung outer space. Pero eventually siguro, if we had the wherewithal, papakailaman pa din yung outer space. But remember, the planning has to take into consideration many things. Tourism, economic growth, intermodality, integratedness, where are the population, where will the population be in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years? Kanya nga segments of 10 yun eh. 20, first segment is 10 years, the next segment, the next 10 years, etc. That's why it's the roadmap to 2050. The plan of the head of that agency really was to legislate that roadmap. Why, Peter? Because if you legislate that roadmap, you effectively prevent the individual legislators who will come in for 1,000 days and make their
Uh-huh.
own. Magawa sila ng sarili nilang airport, magawa sila ng sarili
Uh,
nilang port, magdaan dito, magdaan ha, gusto ko dahil dito, nandito yung aking teritoryo, etc. No
Oo.
rhyme, no reason. So, unfortunately, ilang hininga na lang ay mag-e-end ng administration. So, sana hindi masayang yung aming trabaho dahil ilang taon namin binunubuno yan eh. Peter, dahil ang aking engagement lang, ang aking experience lang sa transport, kung bakit naman political scientist ako, dinapaan ko tong transport, is because Francis Tolentino was my student. Tapos nung
Mhm.
naging chairman siya, di ba, ng MMDA, binitbit niya
IMB.
ako doon. Oo. So, siyempre, eventually, pinag-aralan ko yon. In fact, eventually, my research team did the BRT for EDSA and the BRT for C5. Nandyan yan eh. Ayun, nag-gather lang ng cobweb somewhere. But yes, we really put so much effort diyan sa BRT because that is the answer to the congestion that we saw in EDSA. So yeah,
Uh-huh.
sana hindi ko alam kung anong binanggit ni Pangulo diyan sa build na yan, kung binanggit
Binanggit
niya
niya,
yung roadmap to 2050. Binanggit ba niya, Peter?
hindi niya po nabanggit yung roadmap to 2050, pero sinabi niya that he na he hopes that it will continue on. Yun ang sinabi
Mhm.
niya na sana mapagpatuloy lahat ng kanyang nasimulan. Yun naman ang niliwanag niya kanina when he was talking about the build.
Yeah,
Ngayon,
siguro,
ma'am,
just to continue siguro to para ma-conclude natin itong area on
mhm,
transport. Siguro pag tumingin tayo ng empirical evidence, meaning makita natin sa eksperyensya ng ibang bansa, makikita natin that the more successes that we see are transports which are managed by the private sector, hindi yung
mhm,
gobyerno. Ito, nakita mo, nakadapa ang gobyerno sa lahat ng sectors, no? The
mhm,
reason why I asked you kung binanggit niya yung roadmap, kasi eventually, magmumove yan sa private sector, sa teritoryo ng private sector because it is really the private sector which will create the value for transport because it is in the interest of the private sector to make the movements of people, goods, services really as smooth as possible because that is the nature of business, di ba? I'm sure you're a businessman yourself and, you would like to deliver your goods when it's still fresh at hindi, yung mangga, hindi
yes,
na
yes
siya,
po.
i-juice mo na lang dahil wala na, nabugbog na sa daan. Because, kasi yung daan mo, lubak-lubak, negative investment na yun dahil nga, nag-alog-alog yung mga mangga. So, transport really is a human security issue. If you
Mhm,
think about it, no? Transport is a human security issue and therefore it should be so central to our planning. So I'm glad they
mhm.
have the build and sana magpatuloy ng kung sino man ang susunod in 2022 at sana ay hindi maisantabi yung roadmap to 2050.
Sana nga, ma'am. Ngayon, sinabi rin po niya, ma'am, that we have the highest revenue in history, highest credit rating in history, lowest rates of underemployment and unemployment, uh, prior Foreign Investment Act, prior to the pandemic, ma'am. Yun po yung isa sa mga highlights na sinabi niya. Would you consider that to be true, ma'am?
I agree. I agree. Our economy was really raging. You cannot contest the numbers there. But I also note that practically the whole world except China now, nakadapa talaga yung ekonomiya. And for good
Opo, opo.
reasons, di ba? And I really don't particularly subscribe to yung mga sinasabi ng mga rating agencies na sobrang lugmok yung ating ekonomiya tapos tayo yung magiging laggard sa Asia. I don't believe that. First of all, we are number 5 in the most mineralized countries in the world. And we have a
Mhm.
cadre of professionals really who can make this country a developed economy in a short time if we put our minds to it.
Ma'am, nabanggit niyo po we are highly mineralized. Na alam naman po natin na ah, mayaman ang ating bansa sa natural resources. Yan po ang pinagmamalaki natin lagi ever since. Kahit nung maliit pa ako, we were studying social studies. Yan po ang lagi ko naririnig na mayaman ang Pilipinas sa natural resources. Bakit po tayo naging mahirap, ma'am?
Maraming rason. Pero ang pinakamalaking rason ay hindi mo siya hinarness na mabuti. At bagamat napakarami natin mga environmental laws, no? Excellent talaga mga laws natin. Meron tayong Mining Act of 1995. Ang daming ngang mga greedy at mga walang pag-iisip sa kinabukasan na magbibigay ka na lang ng mga permit, no? Ng mga concession permits dito sa mga korporasyon na hindi mo tinitignan na yung kinakailangang environmental, social, and governance issues are being complied with. You know, we don't lack in environmental laws. In fact, ewan ko kung nasabi ko na dati na ang mga Chinese lawyers are almost always here at the UP College of Law kasi nagpapatulong sila sa ating mga lawyers because we have the best environmental laws and with no
Actually,
contest.
binanggit din po ni President kanina nga yung environment that he was very concerned about it. Ma'am, would you say and would you think that his administration has done something really good for our mineral resources?
I think, although it's always premature to make any assessment right now, Peter, ayaw ko kasing gawin yan dahil unfair sa kanila. At wala akong datos sa may kamay ko, no? Pero sana yung susunod na siguro may effort but the efforts were not enough. Signatory naman tayo sa Paris Agreement ng 2015 and unfortunately that only depends on state action, which means dapat gawin mo kung may initiative ka, kung hindi mo gawin wala namang sanction, no? But I'm sure, Peter, nakita mo kung gaano kalakas at iba yung tono ng ulan na the past 3 days. Nakita mo yung mga nangalunod sa Germany na sabi nila for the past 60
mundo, ma'am.
years.
What happened?
Yes, nakita mo yung mga nangyari sa China. Everything,
sa Belgium,
yung black swans na tinatawag, nothing that had happened in 100 years, yung mga ganong mga declaration nila, this will be the new environment that we will have to work with. That is why yung mga nagtatangkang maging leader natin, siguro unahin ninyo yan sa number 1 sa inyong listahan ng inyong ipopromesa sa amin, climate change, at number 2, health and education. Dalawa lang, no? Dalawa niyang listahan yan. Kaya health and education ay pinagdugtong ko kasi talaga magkadugtong talaga yan.
Yes, ma'am. And the president was very clear kanina about the education that he made, the education actually free for everybody because he believes that education empowers people. Ma'am, dito po sa polisiya ng presidente tungkol sa edukasyon, how do you find it?
Well, as an educator, I find that it's a good move. Free education, K-12, and then state universities, free everything. But I think we need a little bit more substantive reforms that need to be done, including the philosophy of learning that we've been used to. If you will notice, even from preschool, nag-i-spoon feed na tayo ng mga bata. Hindi natin pinapayagan ng mga batang magtanong ng why and why not. Ang ating mga instructional materials may conclusion na, ba't magbibigay ng conclusion? Paano gagamitin ng mga bata ang kanilang utak kung may conclusion na yung nandun sa kanilang mga libro? Dapat ang mga guro, no, tulad ko, ay dapat maglahad lamang ng mga datos on the ground and then magtanong ka sa mga estudyante mo, palagay nyo ba ang martial law ay maganda noong 1972 hanggang 1981 or hindi maganda? Hindi makikita mo agad sa mga libro, no? Kasi dahil nakikita ko, tinutulungan ko yung mga apo ko mag-aral, agad may declaration na martial law was wrong and was destructive.
Yes.
Which is not fair. No, kasi
Yes.
pag hinimay-himay mo yan sa foreign policy, no, iba may grade ka dyan, sa agriculture may grade ka dyan, sa health may grade ka dyan, and you will have pluses and minuses, and my hunch is that you will have more pluses rather than minuses.
Ma'am, why do you think that happens in our education system? Like yung prejudice sa martial law. Kasi po, like sinasabi yan, of course, because I have young nieces and nephews, when we talk about martial law, I always tell them it's constitutional. If it is bad, it should have been stricken out of the Constitution. But it's still there. So it must be used for something. It must be good for something. Ma'am, ako po kasi masyado akong bata when the martial law of the Marcos regime happened. Was it really as bad as how they pictured it to us?
Let me answer that again in a circular way. One reason why
Yes, ma'am.
the dominant discourse or the dominant narrative would be the military atrocities. So many disappeared, my classmates here in the UP, my colleagues tortured, etc., was because this was the one that was repeatedly happening after Marcos left or was forced to leave the country. What was hidden were narratives of the bureaucratic reform that Marcos did in the bureaucracy. Okay? What Marcos did for agrarian reform, what Marcos did for foreign policy. We moved away from the US. We established relationship with Eastern Europe, with USSR, with China, and all of these things. Do you read about them, Peter? You don't read about them. Okay.
I don't get to read about them.
Yes. Unfortunately, there are a few people who wrote about the Marcos regime, but they chose which parts they're going to write. Okay, whenever you have so many stories, you have as many stories as there are storytellers, isn't it? Ngiwiin mo na yung story mo according to gusto mong ingiwi. And therefore, my point is that dapat ang gagawa ng istorya, ang assessment, scholars. Kasi ang scholar, walang agendang gawing gwapo siya o gwapa siya. Ang scholar, susunod lang niya yung data. Ang scholar makikita na, wow, ito pala si Marcos ang gumawa ng open relations with Eastern Europe even ahead of the USSR because ayaw niya talaga tayong maging tail ng ng America.
Ng Amerika.
Have you heard that narrative? No. Now,
No.
why am I telling you this? Because Marcos was the subject of my PhD dissertation as well as magsaysay. So, lulun na ako dyan. Unfortunately, my dissertation only related to one aspect of Marcos's and Magsaysay's regime, but the rest, they will have to be done by other scholars. I stress scholars because scholars do not have any political agenda. They will just follow the numbers and they will tell the story according to what the numbers are telling them.
Kanina po, ma'am, the president was very, very clear na ayaw niya sa Amerika. He said, I have not been to the States for like 20 years. And when they were asking me to go to the States, hinihingi ko muna yung balang gigabells. Ibalik nyo yan dahil may kahulugan sa amin ng mga bells na yan historically, and you murdered a village using those bells, and you took it with you to the States like a trophy. You give it back to us, and then I will think about going to the States. And then the bell was given back to us, right, ma'am? And then he never went anyway because he said he has no desire to go to the States and be with them. Do you think the president shares this sentiment with the former presidents Magsaysay and Marcos, ma'am?
The quick answer is maybe partly. Both Magsaysay and Marcos were close to the US. In fact, the first country they visited, as in the case of all the rest of the presidents after the war, was the United States of America. For good reasons. We were their colonizers, and our closest defense ally was the United States of America. And we continue to be the defense ally of the US because we have the Philippine-US Mutual Defense Treaty. the disgusto of the president in regard to the US also may have basis. There are personal stories, and we will not repeat it anymore in this program. And there are
Mm-hmm.
other stories which he had heard. But and if you will recall, the thing that he really went after was to abrogate the visiting forces agreement, isn't it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes. But fortunately, I've been a senior consultant of the Visiting Forces Commission for a good part of 7 years now. And so I know what that's all about. The Visiting Forces Agreement is only one of the legs of the Mutual Defense Treaty. You want to
Mm-hmm.
change Philippine-US relations, you shoot down the Mutual Defense Treaty. Not the BFA, not the Securities Engagement Board, not the MILSA, not the EDCA. These are all legs of the
Mm-hmm.
MDT. So baliin mo yung isang leg, no? Ando pa yung MDT. Dapat kung gusto mong tugisin at ibahin mo yung relasyon natin sa Amerika, ang tugisin mo yung Mutual Defense Treaty. But the security environment has changed, and we don't need to tell you what's happening in the contested South China Sea and East China Sea. And
Mm-hmm.
more likely, we shall be following the guidance of the regional anchor sa security natin, which is Suga, Prime Minister Suga, Japan, because Japan is now, wielding the baton for the rest of us in the region, together with the
Mm-hmm.
Quad, India, Australia, and the United States. Now, why did I say that more likely we are going to side with them, or that the future president in 2022 is more likely to side with them? Because we are democracies. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
the alternative is, is not acceptable to us if we pay attention to ideology as such. And for as long as we have the Mutual Defense Treaty, and for as long as we recognize where we are geographically, kita mo tayo, Peter, ha? Nakadapa tayo sa gitna. To our east would be what? The Pacific Ocean. Further down, you have Oregon, California, etc. To our west is our other neighbor, China.
Mm-hmm.
That's why if you've read that paper by, what's his name, Michael Sullivan, he said, the Philippines is an integral and critical part of American security interests. Ang layo ng
Mm-hmm.
kapinawa. Andun pa, di ba? Di ba
Mm-hmm.
meron silang how
Mm-hmm.
many thousands of Americans do they have there? How many thousands of Americans do they have in South Korea? It is because of our strategic location that we stupid people should really pay attention to this. Ace natin to eh. And right now, we have
Mm-hmm.
the upper hand. Kasi ang Amerika would like to deny the region to China's hegemony. So, na-notice mo si Biden, siya yung nagsasabi kay Duterte, gusto niyang makipag-usap. Hindi naman
Makipag-usap,
pinipili.
yes.
Hindi ba? Reaching out to South Korea, to Suga, to Japan, kasi tayo yung part ng kanyang defense perimeter. But we will no
Mm-hmm.
longer allow ourselves to be part of the defense perimeter of US.
Mm-hmm.
Alam mo, nung nasa defense ako, every time we go to the Pacific Command sa Honolulu, alam nila nagagalit ako agad kapag yung commandant will use the word shaping the security architecture. Magtataas
Ah.
agad ako ng kamay, sabihin ko, hello? Bakit? Sino ka ba? Si Pygmalion ka ba? Ba't shape ang ginagawa mo? Paano naman kami? Hindi mo naman kami tinanong. So meron silang
Uh-huh.
joke doon na pag andyan si Carlos si Bob, sabihin mo sa commandant, huwag gamitin yung word na shape.
So right now,
Naging
ma'am,
ako doon.
you believe, yeah, you believe that we are that the U.S. is not is doing us a disservice by making us a defense territory.
No, not a disservice. It's part of realpolitik. What I'm saying is
Mm-hmm.
that we should understand and we should locate ourselves and should accept how important we are to the security architecture of the United States of America.
Okay, okay, okay.
Ganon ang
Now
unang
that
saldo mo sa negotiation eh. Hindi yung tiklop ka agad, no?
opo.
Alam mong importante ka. Ibang-iba yung ganong stance, Peter, kaysa yung
Mm,
alam mong, ano nga ba yung bibigay natin? Yes, bibigay mo kasi
yeah.
siguro millions of years pa bago ka maaalis dyan sa gitna ng Pacific Ocean at South China Sea. Di ba?
And that's why probably the president is like that, dealing with the U.S. right now.
Yeah, but he is not
Do
quite
you
right.
agree with the kind of dealings that he's giving USA, ma'am?
maybe if he has more time to dwell on this after his presidency, he may be a bit too harsh on the United States, and the United States has been extending its hand to us, although it has also done a lot of harm to us in the past. But yes, as
I
I
think
said,
nandudun po siya sa nakatingin sa what America has done to us for in the past. Kaya siguro parang yung kanyang tiwala, hindi niya maibigay ng todo sa Amerika. Do you believe that so, ma'am?
yeah, unfortunately,
Kaya siya skeptical?
we are not able to recognize the basic reality that for our security interests, we rely on the US. For our economic interests, we rely on China. And that goes
Okay.
for many other nations. If you will notice, Germany, France, Italy, they don't want to kowtow to Biden's anti-China policy because they want to
Yeah.
sell 1.4 billion.
Yeah,
Well, it's
yeah.
the same with us. Of course, kung meron kang mahahanapan, Peter, na magtinda ng iyong ng saging, pineapple, virgin coconut oil, di wag mo nang pansinin yung huge market ng China, diba?
Yeah. Ma'am,
Yan,
speaking of China, the president said din po kanina that he was playing it safe for all the Filipinos because as you said, nakita po natin yung sinabi ng Vice President natin na si Leni Robredo when she even used the word sana all. Ang gobyerno daw dapat sana all magpakita pa ng tapang in dealing with China. And then the president said earlier, sinabi niya na, ang gusto niyo ba makipaggerahan tayo sa China? Kasi hindi ko nakikita na mananalo tayo sa China right now. That's why parang he said that he's doing his best to have an amicable relationship with China. What is your take on that, ma'am?
I agree with him. That's not just the rational way to go. That's the pragmatic way to go. Do you know, China, pipitikin lang tayo niyan, pinapagtawanan tayo niyan. I'm sure nakita mo na yung mga barko natin na puro kalawang, no?
Yes,
O
yes,
kaya yung mga
yes.
Coast Guard mo na kulang-kulang sa sa gasolina para humabol-habol yan. So wag na tayo magpanggap, okay? So ang sinasabi ni President Duterte, alam ko ang sitwasyon on the ground. In the meanwhile, no? Kailangan nating we need a collective stance, ASEAN, APEC, or with whatever, to deal with China because China wants to deal with us bilaterals. Gusto niya one-on-one kasi siya palagi siyang mas strong kung one-on-one. But yes, we need the collective support of the international community. But how? Let's talk operational terms. Huwag natin gamitin yung malalaking mga words na hindi natin alam kung ano yan, what it means on the ground. Halimbawa, mag-shift tayo from the regional code of conduct. Let us talk of quarreling about the fish. Yung fish naman talaga yung resource dyan eh. Dahil papunta na tayo sa renewables, huwag mo nang pakialaman yung yung langis dyan, Yung fish talagang pinapag-awayan natin. So, let's have a regional fishing agreement and let everyone, not just the 6 claimant countries, including us, but everyone else whose fishing industry will be affected by what is happening in the contested East and South China Sea to be participant in the regional fishing agreement. So that China cannot unilaterally declare na fishing holiday, etc. Paano naman kami, miski isang gulong-gunga, wala kang maibigay sa amin. So, hindi mo pwedeng i-declare yan unilaterally. It has to be declared by a convention, by an agreement. Second, I don't know if you've heard that the UP Marine Science Laboratory in Pag-asa will be refurbished and will be enhanced. And I think our PhD students in marine science, oceanologists, and related disciplines will have to stay there for a semester or two so that it becomes really a research station, not just for us, but other scholars all around the world. So, and I've challenged China, my Chinese counterpart. Yung mga ginawa niyong 7 artificial islands, gawin niyo rin yan research station. Huwag niyong gawing weaponized na radar stations because it will not be good for the region. You are just going to introduce an arms race. And because we're in this issue, why don't we declare this whole, wala namang may-ari ng dagat, no? Why don't we declare it as a global commons? Why don't we declare it as a heritage of mankind? It can be done. Antarctica is a heritage of mankind. No one owns Antarctica. Walang dapat may-ari ng dagat. Kasi
Mhm.
mali din ang Amerika, 'di ba sabi niya ako may-ari ng outer space kasi yan ang aking arena of authority. Mali din ang Amerika. Teka,
Uh-huh.
ba't nyo ba pinag-aawayan yung mga when it should be the heritage of every one of us, 8 billion of us. Hindi ba, Peter? Nakita mo
Yes,
yung
ma'am. I believe that.
shifting of thinking and shifting of the framework
Yes.
moves you away from the territorial sovereignty issues.
Yeah,
Is that
it gets you to understand humanity better if you shift your thinking to that sense, di ba, ma'am? Yeah.
yes? Why not?
Now that
Why not?
yeah. Do you think that the president is heading that way with the kind of dealing he's doing with China?
I have not read anything about that, but I'm sure if we introduce the subject to him, he will agree.
Mhm, mhm.
Ngayon kasi lulun na lulun tayo sa Regional Code of Conduct eh. Diyos ko,
Yes.
kakamatayan ko na yan. 20 years ago, nasa depensa ko. Pinapag-awayan na natin yan. Wala namang
Uh,
yan eh. Wala namang pupuntahan yan eh. Diba?
but ma'am, maiksi lang maiksi lang talaga na discussion in regards to China. Ang dami ho kasi haka-haka, kwento na ganito, kwento ni ganyan. Si Carpio, tsaka ang nawala ang China noong 2016, nawala ang Scarborough Shoal nung nakipag-usap si Senator Trillanes sa China na sikreto. Pag balik niya, 3 weeks later, hindi na sa atin na Scarborough Shoal. Do you have an idea of what really transpired, ma'am, in that area of discussion? Kung ano talaga nangyari?
Well, the little I know, first of all, I think Trillanes was given a title of a special envoy to talk to some people in China. I think this is
Mhm.
part of back channeling, which often
Yeah.
happens. It just happens to be that Trillanes was the one assigned to do that. And
Mhm.
I think there was a standoff in Scarborough where both Chinese and Filipino forces were there, and the U.S. became the interlocutor. And
Mhm.
as far as I know, Peter, no, kasi hindi ko talaga alam yung istorya niyan from an intel standpoint. As far as we
Mhm.
know, the Philippines, because we're honorable people, we withdrew.
We
But China
withdrew.
stayed. Okay, but
Mhm.
let's assume for the sake of discussion that China is there now. China is in fact, they're all over the contested South China Sea, part of which is our exclusive economic zone. The thing is, the reality really on the ground would be that no one really wants to go to war. Nakita nyo kahapon, meron
Mhm.
na naman British, frigate nandyan na naman and nagpapakitang gilas na naman. But these are all just postures, no? No one really wants to go to war. That's why we're saying, why don't you start inviting China to all these uh, conflict areas? Why don't you ask China to contribute to the shared future which Xi Jinping continues to talk about? Bakit hindi natin
Mhm.
imbitahin yung China? Do you know,
Mhm.
Peter,
Mhm.
China wants to exercise with us. Have you heard of that? Yes, Russia wants to exercise with us. Japan wants to exercise with us. Why not? You know, if they want to exercise with us, hindi naman talaga monopoly lang ng Amerika yung status of forces agreement, yung visiting forces agreement. Let us get everybody to exercise with us. When we exercise for humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, recovery, then we plant seeds of trust, confidence, and at a later time when we need to talk about more sensitive things like territory and sovereignty, nagtanim na tayo ng goodwill eh. Nakita mo yon?
Mhm.
You're
Mhm.
moving from low
Mhm.
politics, pupunta ka sa high politics. And that's exactly what I did when I was still president of the National Defense College. I invited 3 full colonels in Beijing to study in our college and 3 full colonels in the Philippines to study in Beijing. Unfortunately, after I left, yung susunod sa akin naggalit. Sabi niya, si Dr. Carlos, bakit naman niya nag-imbita ng mga Chinese, paano na naman yung mga sikreto natin? Dito mo pag-aaralin yan. Oh my Lord, sabi ko, meron ba tayong
Sino
sikreto?
yon, ma'am?
Ayoko na, wag na nating sabihin kung sino siya. But the point is, when you study together for 1 year, Peter, I'm sure alam mo
Opo.
yan. You
Oho.
learn, you get to know each other, your family, etc. talagang magbi-build ka ng camaraderie and trust. And where you have differences in opinion, you accept each other's differences. Iba talaga yung human warm body to warm body interaction for 1 year. That is what's happening in the National Defense College. So can you imagine if we have done that? We would have planted, siguro yung full colonel noon, ngayon general na yan, o baka na nga retired na yan, ano? Yun ang sinasabi ko, there are many ways outside of the military option to deal with this issue. After all, wag na natin paulit-ulit yung arbitral award na yan because the award did not award anything. It simply
Yes, he actually mentioned that kanina, ma'am. He actually mentioned that kanina. Let's just move forward in dealing with the situation. And of course, giniit din niya na hindi talaga gera ang magiging sagot dito.
Yeah, nobody wants to go to war. China wants to sell to the world. Who wants to go to war? No? Messaging talaga, Peter, is very important.
Yes.
I-message mo sa tao, ikaw bilang journalist, ang award ay simply, it was not an award, it simply declared walang basis yung drawing ng China. Yun lang. Okay. Like any international law, any declaration na gawin mo, tulad ng United Nations resolutions, pag hindi mo nilagyan ng puwersa yan, laway lang yan. It's just a piece of paper. Diba? How many resolutions andyan lang sa tabi-tabi? Wala lang. Kasi walang pwede.
Yeah.
Diba?
Speaking of war, ma'am, ang nangyari sa Marawi, diniscuss din kanina ng Pangulo, and he humbly admitted that hindi pa rin natin nababawi ang Marawi sa pagkakalugmok nito because of whatever is delaying, but because we actually don't know, ma'am. Do you have any idea of what happened in Marawi? Na bakit hindi pa natin siya
my mind is anecdotal, so it might not be it might hide the real story, but one of my senior research assistants is from there. The first thing, and she is a fairly well-off person. She comes from a prominent family, and the first thing that she did was that, again, Manila planned for us. Tinanong ba kami, considering that she's one of the elites there, tinanong ba kami kung anong disenyong gusto namin? Siyempre, merong style ng living ang mga Muslims doon. No? Ang style ng living nila, ayon sa kanilang kultura, sa paniniwala nila, sa kanilang relationship, societal relationship, hindi pwede magtatatag ka ng bahay doon na hindi ayon sa kanilang style.
Sa kanilang.
Diba? Naglagay ka na naman ng doon, ng isang retired military, no? Okay nga, to be fair to the military, pag inutusan mo, gagawin yan. Pero magbigay kayo ng konting alagwa, konting damdamin, dun sa mga damdamin ng mga tao na for whom you are rebuilding a city. No? You cannot build a modern city according to the Western architecture kasi you are building for a people whose deep cultural roots are such that they are manifested in their environment, in their homes, in their streets, etc. Di ba? Sa Europe, Peter, yung ang liliit na mga streets sa Brussels, di ba?
Yes.
European cities. Because that reflected the life of the people before. Diba? Hindi ka pwedeng bigla na lang ang gaganda ng mga na mga lalagay mo diyan, sasabihin ng mga taga Marawi is na
that is not the way we live.
Yes, that is not the way we live. Parang kontrang-kontra yan sa amin. So, sana, sabi ko nga, anecdotal, no? The caveat here is anecdotal ito. But the thing is, yes, because my research assistant belongs to a prominent family, so I would imagine may laman yung sinasabi niya.
Yes. That's why po siguro that the President said that hindi naman niya sinabing failure ang Marawi development. He just said na parang it did not go the way he planned. Parang ganun ang kanyang implication na sinabi niya tungkol sa Marawi. And probably it has something to do with what you are telling us now, with your assistant researcher was telling you.
Yeah, kasi mahilig tayo sa Manila magdisenyo para sa ibang tao. Di ba? Hindi ka nagtanong.
So,
hindi nagtanong.
And then speaking of war, ang isa pang he was always been passionate about was the communist insurgency. He was kumakawala na nga siya, ma'am, dun sa kanyang binabasa when he was talking about communism and how it destroyed the youth and how it destroyed families and how recruitments of the terrorist group that he declared is affecting the country. He was kind of passionate about that. Ma'am, what is your take on our what the government is doing right now for the development of the far-flung places with establishment of EO 70 or NTF LCAC?
If you will notice, a lot of these moves of the government are draconian moves, no? Where they're almost always moving around, pivoting around people, violating rules, etc., like that.
Mhm.
And we've been repeatedly saying 1 million times the source of insurgents would be the lack of opportunity to study, to dream, to be an engineer, to be a doctor, to be a scientist. Bigay mo yan dyan sa mga bata na yan. Hindi yan hahawak ng baril, kundi libro. Paulit-ulit na. At wag na natin gamitin yung salitang communist kasi wala na pong katuturan yan. Yung tinatawag na communist country na Russia at saka China are all capitalists. Everyone wants to really just have a good quality of life. So, bigay mo dito. Sinasabi nila kami nagmamanufacture dito sa UP ng mga communists. No. What we're doing is we're giving a buffet to the student. We're telling them, okay, itong sinabi ni Karl Marx. Ito naman ang sinabi ni John Stuart Mill. Ito sinabi ni Machiavelli. Pili kayo dyan kung ano yung mga putahe gusto ninyo. But all of this, merong pluses siya, merong minuses siya. Now, if you decide to hold the gun to change things, then choice mo yan. I mean, Peter, I've been teaching for 55 years. Yung mga iba, nagpunta sa sa bundok. Yung mga iba, naging senator at naging congressman at naging magnanakaw din. Okay, so, yun naman ako kasi yun ang pinili nilang style ng buhay nila. The thing is, we are not manufacturing communists in the UP. We are really teaching our students to think critically. If they make a choice and we get them when they're 17, 18, 19, pangatawan na nila yung choice nila. No? At wag nilang i-blame sa aming mga guro. Kasi kaming mga guro ay naglalahad lamang ng istorya ng pananaw ng mga tao. At ano naman yan sabi nga namin anong komunista sinasabi mo? Siguro kung meron sinasabi mong socialist country, yung US na yung pinaka-socialist kasi siya yung nag-i-intrude sa lahat ng individual aspects ng life ng tao. Yan ang ibig sabihin ng socialism. Bakit democracy ginagamit mo? Do you see when you use labels and you don't even know what the labels mean? That's why stop using the word communist kasi wala nang katuturan yan. Tayo na lang ang bansa gumagamit niyan.
But do you believe, ma'am, that we have a problem with regards to the terrorist problem? Let's not use a communist anymore, since you said that we shouldn't use that term anymore. Since they have been declared as terrorists, the NDF recently has been declared terrorist. Do you believe that we have to get rid of this problem fast with the help of NTF LCAC?
Yeah. Stop using labels like insurgents or the left, etc. Just treat them as criminals. If they hijack, run after them as hijackers. If they keep people, run after them as killers. Let's not quibble about the use of words. We have everything in our penal laws, more than everything, to run after them as criminals. In the meanwhile, you provide every opportunity for a child born in this world to have the opportunity to be like you and me, to dream big. Once you kill their dreams, ang dali-daling bigyan mo yan ng punyal, ng gun. And they'll say, I have nothing to lose. Di ba? Pag tinignan mo yung, I wrote a paper on the anatomy of terrorism, ganyan yan. Yan ang umpisa niyan. No? Ayan, walang oportunidad na 10 silang magkakapatid, hindi nakapag-aral, walang oportunidad na tumaas ang kanyang gusto niyang maging guro. Meron nag-ano sa kanya, may nag-inganyo sa kanya, uy, sali ka dito sa amin, ha? Bigyan kita ng baril. Baril is empowering, di ba? Yung bata
Yeah.
powerless, hindi nga nakapag-aral, etc. Yan ang pakialaman mo. Unang-una sabihin mo sa magulang, please, wag naman kayo mag-produce ng 10, 2 lang po, no? Yung pwede yung pag-aralin. Madami, di ba, dugtong-dugtong, Peter? I'm sorry,
Dugtong-dugtong.
it's really such a dugtong-dugtong itong problema eh. Dalawa
Ma'am,
yung anak mo, libre naman lahat. Oh.
Nakakausap po namin ang si Secretary Badoy, nag-guest po sa amin, si Attorney Marlon, na pareho po silang spokesperson ng NTF-ELCAC. And the agency is now actually doing the barangay development program. Wherein, yan po, yung mga binabanggit ninyo, ay pumupunta po sila talaga sa mga lugar na yon at ine-educate nila ang mga tao to be what they want to be without choosing violence. So, doon po ba sa programa na yun ng NTF-ELCAC, I don't know if you are familiar with that. Would you support that kind of, at saka may kasama rin po sila mga ex-rebels because there were thousands of rebel returnees who na nagbalik loob sa gobyerno. Do you believe in the NTF-ELCAC's barangay development project to be very helpful in eradicating this problem of criminals?
Siguro it's just one aspect of public information siguro, pero wag na sila makialam sa edukasyon kasi yan ay mandato ng Department of Education. Wag na silang dadapa sa hindi nila dapat dapaan, no?
So, pardon me, ma'am. Pardon me. With what I meant about educating them is they are telling them yung setbacks if you join the kilusan. Yun po yung parang education na binibigay nila dun sa mga tao.
But that can only, may limits naman yung sasabihan mo niyan eh. It's like one time, Peter, I was asked to speak to some fairly senior people on why corruption in fact should stop in our society, etc., with the end in view of changing their behavior. I said, you are wasting my time. You know, I'm talking to 40, 50-year-old people. Palagay mo ba mag-change ng mind yan kasi nagsabi si Carlos na ganito yung corruption? No, doesn't work that way. The only way for corruption to stop is make it painful for them to steal, you know. Preso mo agad sila. Wala namang napepreso eh. So,
nga po eh.
Saya, di ba?
Yeah. Ngayon po, isa pa po sa binanggit ng Pangulo ay ang universal healthcare. He was very, sinabi niya, isa po ito sa mga, sinabi niya pa nga, hindi ko ito mapapagmalaki dahil hindi lang naman daw siya ang gumawa nito. In fact, he was thanking the Congress for having this implemented, yung universal healthcare. Ma'am, just to, para lang doon sa mga nanonood natin na sa layman's term, ang universal healthcare po ay?
Well, ang universal healthcare, universal kasi lahat dapat kasali. Okay. Healthcare kasi kung kailangan mong ma-ospital ay kahit wala kang salapi ay merong hospital na tatanggap sa iyo at hindi ka hihinga ng X number of thousands para ka ano yun, to be attended to be cared for. Pero sobrang daming limitasyon ng universal healthcare natin. Nakita ninyo na ang PhilHealth, ang dami-daming mga codicil, no? Alam ko yan kasi original member ako ng PhilHealth, na alam natin na kung hindi tayo naka-confine ay hindi tayo makakasingil sa PhilHealth. Ang daming mga conditionalities. Ang universal healthcare dapat ay as far as practicable, wala siyang conditionalities. At dapat yung healthcare mo is preventative. Ibig sabihin, i-prevent mo, so meron ditong food security, meron ditong nutrition, wag mong punuin ang iyong mga airwaves ng mga pagkakain ng mga pwedeng magtama yung tao, magkaroon ng diabetes, magkaroon ng sakit sa puso. I-prevent mo na yun para hindi ma-challenge ang iyong mga health facilities. Di ba? So, the universal healthcare is beyond just providing subsidies or support to people. It is really a healthy way of living. Unfortunately, lost to us eh. Ang PhilHealth kasi natin na sige ha, Peter, ha, doon ka lang sa ward kasi yung ward will only pay you X number of thousand. Pero pag nagpunta ka sa semi-private, may copay ka na dyan. No? Ang
Yes.
universal healthcare talaga, at wag natin kopyahin yung Amerika, talagang bulok talaga yung healthcare doon. No?
Oo.
Ay, kapag meron akong, miski wala akong salapi, magkasakit ang aking mga pamilya, takbo ako sa hospital. The hospital is fully equipped. Hindi po pwedeng may hospital na hindi siya tertiary. Fully equipped siya. Lahat libre. Now, bakit siya lahat libre? Dahil binabawas mo sa sweldo ko yung healthcare component at malaking parte ng sweldo ko ang kinukuha mo. So that hindi ko na kailangan maggastos sa dentist, maggastos sa x-ray, etc. Kasi alam ko libre lahat yan. Yun ang universal healthcare.
Yan po ang nangyayari sa atin ngayon with the kind of universal healthcare that we have?
No.
No.
Far from it. I'm
Far
sure
from
alam mo
it.
yung PhilHealth ang middle name niyan exceptions. Diba?
Pero ma'am, kasi with the universal healthcare, sinabi ng Pangulo kanina na mayroon ng aasahan ng mga tao, meron na silang kakapitan kapag sila'y nagkasakit. But as you were saying, kasi po, kagaya po nung naiisip namin kanina ng team ko when we were talking about the universal healthcare, nung araw kasi, hindi po ba ma'am, nandiyan, pinasa na po yan hindi po ba? Matagal na po yan sinabing hindi kailangan ng humingi ng deposito. I think it was earlier than 2010 when it was passed. Pero sa public hospital lang yon. But if you go to a private hospital that, as you said, yun ang fully equipped hospitals, doon ka po magdideposito. Pero tama po ba yung sinasabi sa universal healthcare na ano na yan, kasali na lahat, private and public hospital? Kung pumunta ka ng private and you emergency case ka, hindi ka hihinga ng deposito?
That's a wish to be desired. Kasi kung ikaw may-ari ng private hospital, hindi ka naman nagtatag niyan. I mean, kailangan mo ng milyones, minsan bilyones to have a hospital to be fully equipped, no? And therefore, you need to have profit, no? Nung yung driver ko ay nagka-stroke, then we had to go to a private hospital kasi yun ang tertiary hospital. Alas 12 ng gabi, ng midnight, hinihingan ako ng 1 million. 1 million, ha?
1 million?
Hindi 10,000, 1 million. Sabi ko, por Diyos por Santo. Miski 10,000, wala akong mahagilap ngayong gabi na to kasi nagka-stroke siya alas 10 ng gabi. So syempre, atras ako, hanap ng hospital na po pwedeng tumanggap. In stroke kasi So that means kailangan madalian ng ano. Okay. Ang universal healthcare natin dapat, wag mong sabihin na yung public hospital marumi, walang x-ray, walang ultrasound, palaging kulang ang bulak, mga plaster, etc. Bakit hindi mo siya i-equip like a private hospital? Ang dami-daming ninanakaw all around sa atin, yung mga pidap-pidap ng pork barrel ng inyong legislators. Ipagsama-sama mo yun, Peter, gumawa ka ng napakaraming tertiary hospital. And to repeat, gawin mo yung healthcare is really to prevent you from getting diabetes, heart attack, etc. Preventive talaga. No? Hindi yung sasaktan bata ng puro mga carbohydrates, mga prito-prito, tapos magtataka ka na ang tataba niya pagkatapos ang liliit pa meron ng sakit sa puso, may diabetes, etc. Kasi mas mura kung ipe-prevent mo kaysa yung tutustusan mo milyones yun So, wag nating sabihin na yung public hospital marumi at Kasi, alam mo ba yung East Avenue Hospital na
Yes.
Dito, may East Avenue?
Yes.
Dati yan, ang tawag namin dyan, American Hospital. Dahil dyan ako lumaki Our house was behind that hospital. And my two children were born there. Talagang fully equipped yan. And dahil nagtuturo na akong noon sa UP, wala akong binayad. Kasi government employee na ako noon Pero I'm sure, although medyo naayos-ayos na rin yan, siyempre, mga tao, pinagbabaklas lahat yung mga nandun sa wall noon. Lahat ng mga mga
artworks.
Yes. Hindi na sa American style, ha? Hindi naman sinasabi kong maganda yon. Pero siyempre, ang ganda-ganda talaga noon. It was really like any Western style tertiary hospital. Fully equipped, no? which is
Yeah.
not the case right now. So,
Yes,
pwede mo
yes.
namang gawin, pwede mo siyang ayusin. Yan ang sinasabi ko, Peter. Ayusin mo yung infrastructure because the warm bodies are already there. I'm sure alam mo yung mga heart surgeons, the top heart
Oo.
surgeons, they are in
Yes, are in
Houston.
Heart Center.
Yes, and they're in Heart
Yes.
Center, they're in Houston, they're all over the world, and they're
Yes.
Filipino heart
Yes, yes.
surgeons, cardiologists, di ba? Ipagsama mo yung human resources mo dun sa infrastructure resources mo, and yes, it can be done. It can be done. Believe me,
Ma'am,
I'm not
speaking of
Messianic or anything. Yeah.
speaking of education, ma'am, since you are an educator, and the president also gave free education to all state-owned university, and we know that the University of the Philippines, where you teach, is one of the most equipped universities we have in the country. I am not from UP, but I acted in Dulaang UP for like good 12 years, and sometimes I nakikisit in ako sa mga klase ng mga kasama ko ng mga taga UP, and I have syempre nakita ko naman ang klase ng edukasyon na makukuha ng isang bata kapag pumasok sa University of the Philippines. Ma'am, given that it is a state university now, and the president has declared that it is a free education already to all the state universities, makukuha pa rin ba ng mga kabataan ang klase ng edukasyon sa UP kesa nung meron pang mga nagbabayad?
Yeah, kasi yung bayad, hindi bayad, libre. It's just an artifact of education. It's not even an important one. And parang yung sinabi kasi, oh Peter, miski nga nagtuturo ako sa ilalim ng papaya, okay lang. Ang importante kasi, empirical evidence tells you that the most critical and the best predictor variable for effective learning is the mastery of the subject matter by the teacher. Konti pera mo, bigay mo sa akin, paaralin mo ko, MA, PhD. Continuing education. Kasi yung level ng initiative ng bata at level ng kanyang involvement sa learning will depend on the teacher. Hindi ka ba naniniwala dyan, Peter? Kaya,
Naniniwala din po ako dyan, ma'am.
yes,
Of course.
kung alam mo yun, no? Then,
Yes.
ibigay mo lahat ng salapi, kahit konti, sa pagte-train ng teachers. Kaya, kesyo, air condition pa yan, kesyo sa ilalim ng mangga, kesyo sira-sira yung bangko ng bata. Kapag yung teacher ay mahusay, you don't need to be in the UP to have the kinds of critical minds that our students have. Sa UP, hindi po kami nag-spoon feed, no? Kasi pag spoon feed ka, sabihin
Yes,
oh
yes.
Peter, please, kill yourself for Reddit, umalis ka na sa
Yeah.
classic. You know, dahil wala ka namang katuturan dito. Di ba? And the graduate class, kailangan magbasa ka ng 300 to 400 pages every week. Kaya mo magbasa, ewan ko kung ba't nandito ka. And that's the way we weed out students who are not supposed to be where they are supposed to be. Nag-MA ka, PhD ka, tapos tamad ka magbasa. Hello? In the UP kasi, mababagsik kami kasi dito. Hindi kami natatakot maglagay ng katakot-takot na na pula, no, na 5. That's the way learning should be, di ba? And I want student, ako, gustong-gusto ko estudyante, challenge ako. Why? Why not? Ano? Pero wag mo ako i-challenge, Peter, dahil nagpapakute ka lang, dahil mumurahin talaga kita. I'm sure sa ibang eskwela, hindi mo pwede i-challenge.
You mentioned that before, ma'am. You mentioned that before, that you want a student to challenge you. Yeah.
Yeah, ibig sabihin kasi, the student is not worshiping me as the master. Wala lang, pareho lang naman kaming estudyante, mas matanda lang ako sa kanila, 'di ba? At kung meron kang nakitang mas magandang datos, sasabihin mo, ma'am, actually meron po ako nakita mas magandang datos dun sa nilahad niyo. And because I'm a scientist and I'm a scholar, I'm going to change my mind. Pero kung nagpapakit ka lang, I'll tell you, Peter, please, lumabas ka at magpatiwakal ka na lang sa labas. You know? That's the kind of thing, 'di ba?
Yeah, binanggit niyo po ang kaakibat ng edukasyon ay health, education and health. You stressed on that. And the president also reiterated kanina the malasakit centers that we have 130 centers all over the country, that the government is actually going to the people to give free medicines and to give free aid to to our less fortunate brothers and sisters. Ma'am, what is your take on the Malasakit Center?
Okay lang yan, pero as usual, ayoko ng fragmented. Gusto ko is a
Mhm.
whole, holistic, comprehensive healthcare reform. No?
Have you ever tried to look deeper into the Malasakit Center? Because the president kanina
I've
was
heard of what
very,
it has
very proud.
done. Yeah, I've
Mhm.
heard of what it has done, but it should be couched in a comprehensive healthcare reform where you're talking training of healthcare workers, where you're talking equipping all hospitals with all advanced equipment, where you're talking paying our nurses the kinds of wages that they should be getting elsewhere in the world. Saka naman nakakita kami ang sister ko kasi ICU nurse no? Nung
Mhm.
nandiyan siya sa isang hospital dito, parang ang sweldo niya 8,000. Wala diyan. Nagpunta siya sa New York. Oh. Eh di, yumaman siya doon. Bakit hindi siya
8,000 pelo dollars.
hindi naman ganun kalaki sa New York, pero nakapag-ipon siya, nakapagpaaral siya
Mhm.
ng ano niya, pero bakit kailangan lumayo pa siya? Sana
Yun nga
dito
po.
na lang.
Yun nga po.
Umpisahan mo dapat, I'm sure Peter, alam mo talaga yung sakripisyo ng mga nurses. Bilib na bilib
Oh,
talaga.
yes, yes.
Not only
Especially
because
itong
my sister
pandemic.
is a nurse. Dapat ang starting salary niyan, take home mga 50 to 60,000. Starting
Mhm.
Starting
Starting.
So, let's not quibble about these things, no? Let's pay attention to those people who really matter in our life. And they are
Mhm.
the medical workers. Kanya nga
Yes.
climate change, hindi naman yan they're not in boxes, they're really part of a continuum. Then health and
Mhm.
education, yung tatlo na lang ang dapaan nung kung sino man nagtatangka maging leader natin.
Now, isa po sa mga sinabi ng Pangulo kanina is the 10-year, of course, alam na natin yung 10 taon na passport. Gusto niya rin gawing 10 taon ang driver's license. Ma'am, do you agree to that? He would want to look into it and have a 10-year driver's license.
Anything that reduces the human intervention and more
Uh,
efficiency. And then siguro, dagdag ko na lang dyan, pag yung bata, anong year na ba siya? Pag 16 years old siya, siguro senior high school na siya, turuan mo siya not only mag-drive, so that means part ng kanyang curriculum is driving, no? At part ng curriculum niya is swimming. Alam mo, dati sa UP, hindi kami makagraduate kung hindi kami makapasa sa swimming. Saan ka nakatira ka sa archipelago, hindi ka marunong mag-swim? Hello?
yeah.
Yung dalawa na yan.
That
Bago ka
makes sense.
pa sa senior high school, marunong ka na mag-drive. At para hindi ka na nagbabayad-bayad yan sa mga sangay na yan, para makakuha ka ng driver's license na nagbebisikleta ka yan. Kaya maraming mga barumbado at tarantado sa daan, di ba?
Binanggit niya rin po kanina, ma'am, ang naging problema natin sa Maynila sa tubig na isinusupply sa atin ng ating mga suppliers. And he was very, very angry. Kinokontrol niya nga yung kanyang bibig kanina na magmura. Minamouth niya na lang. Galit na galit siya doon sa pagsasamantala na nangyari sa Pilipino pagdating sa tubig. Na sinisingil tayo since 1995 or 1997 ng kaukulang presyo to improve our water supply, but it actually didn't happen. So, kinol niya ang kinauukulan ng mga tao para pansinin ito. Ma'am, nasaan na tayo doon sa lagay natin na yon? Kasi sinabi niya po na they are going to comply.
Well, unang-una, alam ko na itong problema na ito many years ago because I had a very good friend who was with the ADB who really wanted to change all the water systems here in Metro Manila. Kasi yan panahon pa yan ng Amerikano, no? Na siyempre nagkakalawang-kalawang na yan, hindi pa naman uso noon yung mga PVC. Guess what? They really rammed into so many people who wanted to have a take on that project, and therefore nag-withdraw yung ADB, pati yung World Bank. Nag-withdraw ng pera para kalkalin lahat yan at ayusin lahat ng ng mga pipes, no? Kasi yan makikita mo dun sa water bill mo yung yung loss, di ba? Yung systems loss. Ibig
System
sabihin, yung
flaws.
mga nagnanakaw ng tubig, yung mga patulo-tulo dyan, yung mga tubo na hindi pinapakailaman, tayong mga
Tayo ang
nagbabayad, yung mga
nagbabayad.
gago na nagbabayad. Okay. Kung sinasabi nila na onerous yung yung concession agreement ng Maynila at saka Manila Water, no? Ba't hindi nila baguhin? Hindi ba? Hindi ako lawyer, Peter, pero why do we keep on saying na onerous yung conditions na yan? Na bakit hindi mo baguhin? Meron sigurong, in fact, nirenew pa nga ata parang last year. No? Alam mo na nga na meron siyang sakit na infirmed yung yung contract. Bakit mo ni-renew? Di ba? Yun ang sinasabi ko to go back na you have a phalanx of lawyers who are supposed to be looking at these things. And yet, bakit ang dami-daming nangyayari na binigay ko na sa yung example na nagko-collide nagko-collide ang mga mandate at tapos tayo pala ay inilagay natin ang sarili natin sa kumunoy, sa katangahan natin. Ano ba ang ginagawa ng mga lawyers na yan? Bayaran ba sila na why did we sign that up? And talking about this signing up a contract, you remember the joint maritime survey understanding between a previous administration and the Chinese? That gave them the leeway to map out our seabed. So mismo tayong gago na nagbigay ng go signal sa kanila, sige, i-map out mo yung seabed natin. Kanina, di ba, we talked about being highly mineralized. Aba, nandiyan sa Philippine Rise, nandito sa east ng Pacific Ocean, at nandyan din, may nagsasabi sa South China Sea na mayroong rare earth. Ang rare earth, yan ang nakalagay ho sa smartphone ninyo. Yan ho din ang nasa baterya ng mga electric vehicles. Sa Japan ngayon, by 2025, no, sinasabi na nila ayaw na nila yung diesel at gasolina. Ganon din sa Europa. Wala na magpuproduce ng diesel at saka gasolina, saka yung internal combustion engine. Kasi baterya na tayo. At ang source ng battery natin, renewable, solar, wind, biomass, etc. Di ba? Ang ganda, di ba? Pero wag ka. Ewan ko kung yung mga nagtatangkang maging leader natin sa 2022, pakinggan mo nga, Peter, kung may magsasalita dyan tungkol sa energy security.
Sinabi rin po, let's watch them and listen to them. Sinabi din ng presidente kanina, ma'am, na may bagong kontrata na raw na hinain na ninanamnam niya lang ang kontrata bago niya pirmahan. Bagong kontrata para dito sa patubig natin. And we have yet to wait for that. Ngayon po, ma'am,
Pero siguro, to be fair na naman to the private sector, Peter, ayusin nyo na yan, ab initio. Huwag na kayong magkamot ng ulo nyo after sinainan nyo yan. And sabihin mo, ay mali. Bago mo pasainan yan, tignan mo pati kama, semicolon, colon. Ano nga bang katuturan nito? Anong implication nito moving forward? Diba?
Yes. Ma'am, naniniwala po ba kayo na itong mga pangangailangan natin sa tubig, sa kuryente, mas maganda pang ibalik sa gobyerno kaysa nasa private sector?
The answer is no. Always, I believe that the government's verb is to regulate. Huwag kang gigitna dyan kasi wala kang pakialam dyan. Ang gagawa talaga ng value, gagawa ng employment, with a profit, of course, in mind, is the private sector. Kanya may gobyerno para lang i-regulate mo ang nangyayari. Hindi ba nangyayari ngayon? Dati hindi nila tinatax ang Amazon, ang mga Big Five, ang Facebook, ang Google. So, teka muna, parang libre ito sa mga tax. I-tax nga natin ito ng 15%. Di ba? So the government will only come in pag nakakita sila ng abuso. That's the work of government. Huwag ka nang makialam dyan. Huwag ka nang maki-contest sa private sector because it is really the private sector who will make things happen. And the private sector now is governed by three major requirements. And this also is being paid attention to by their investors, yung tinatawag na ESG, environment, social factors, and governance. And they make sure that and maganda talaga to kasi the empirical data will tell you, Peter, na corporations who in fact comply with the so-called sustainability factors are in fact the ones that are flourishing. Because the investors continue to support them because they know they're not going to destroy the environment.
Ma'am, ito po ang pinakahuli kong i-discuss sa inyo, ang war on drugs. Kanina po nakita namin ang passion ng presidente when he was talking about this. In fact, he said na, again, minamouth niya yung mura. Hindi siya makapagmura kanina kasi sinabi niya he's a good boy pagdating dun sa last Sona niya. He was talking about the effects of drugs to people. Yung pong pinatay na babae, ginahasa at pinatay at sinunog pa ang katawan. Yung batang 3 years old na ginahasa dahil lulong sa droga ang ama o tiyo. And he was in fact, sinabi pa niya kay Senator Bato na, o pag nakita mo yung mga ganyang klaseng tao, barilin mo na lang tapos sumama ka sa akin sa ICC sa kaso, total, nadudo naman ako. He was making a joke on that. Ma'am, yung kanyang war on drugs, marami po ang nagsasabi that it was a success. Of course, nandiyan pa rin ang droga, hindi pa rin naman natin na-eliminate. But what could be a measure of success pagdating sa war on drugs?
To me, the measure of success on the war on drugs would be first, two things: to go after the source.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure many times the government has identified the source. They are domestic as well as foreign sources. Hanapin mo yung gripo kasi mas mahirap sundan yung tubig na nanggagaling sa gripo.
Yes.
And pangalawa, it is not a police issue, it's a health issue. Yung dalawa na lang yun. Magkambyo sila, no? Hanapin mo yung source at gawin mo siyang hindi police issue. Siyempre may police part doon, mga drug lords, mga drug pushers, pero it is basically a health issue. So, yan, di ba binitiwan na yung if you will notice, the word rehab, it does not appear in many of the government declarations, when once upon a time in 2016, it was really so central to how to deal with drug users, di ba? It's a health issue, it's a social issue. So, yun ang pagtuunan mo ng pansin. Bakit may kawatak-watak ang pamilya? Bakit yung authority structures ng pamilya nasira? Malalim eh. Kung hindi mo yan lalaliman ng ganyan, titignan mo lang yung nasa ibabaw. Sige, patayin mo na yan kasi drug pusher o drug user sige, patayin mo na yan. Palagay mo ba, pag parang hydra yan pinatay mo nga yan ang dami rin pa namang magda-drugs pa din kasi yung source, hindi mo sinara Isara mo yung source. Isara mo yung gripo from the source. From whichever country.
The president has also said in his speech that most of the the illegal drugs are coming in the country na galing sa ibang bansa because we somehow contained the drug manufacturing in the Philippines. That's what he said. That's why sa customs daw, halos araw-araw, bilyon ang nahuhuli ng mga droga ng mga otoridad. So, ma'am, kasi binanggit niya pa that there is a boat somewhere in the middle of whatever ocean that was, and they manufacture the drug there, and then they bring it into the country na nasasalata naman po ng mga otoridad papasok sa bansa. Would you consider that as one of the successes that the president has?
Maybe so, but as I said, the more effective way would be to talk to these countries which are the sources of these drugs. Parang yan malware, di ba? Parang yung spyware. Sinasabi nila if it comes from X, Y country, kausapin mo yung mga countries na yan kasi for all you know, the state is also using this spywares against other states, no? At yun nga, sinabi ko nga, gawin mo siyang health issue. No? Gawin mong issue yung and to go back to yung earlier proposal ko, always have an effective sanction mechanism, no? Kasi the demonstration effect is very very powerful. Pag pinakita mo na yung drug lord talaga ay pinabulak mo diyan sa 100 years ka diyan sa sa preso tapon mo na yung susi diyan. And you make sure na hindi in collusion ng iyong law enforcement people, and I'm sure you know Peter, that they are in collusion. So hindi rin ako naniniwalang nasugpo mo na yung nasa local kasi I also know many PNP and maraming mga local laboratories na hindi pa nila natutunton, and worse, some of them is in collusion yung law enforcement, di ba?
And that's what he mentioned also earlier, ma'am, because he said that when he was fighting the war, he never knew that he was fighting his own government. Because there were 9 generals, pero hindi niya na binanggit kung sino-sino. There are 9 generals who are actually participating in the manufacturing of drugs.
Yeah, so nasan sila ngayon? Di ang sasaya ng 9 generals na yan na sinasabi niya. Bakit hindi niya sampulan yun? Di ba? Kung merong ebidensya, filean mo ng case, no? Bigyan mo ng 120 years na ilang reclusion perpetua na conviction, na sentence, at itapon mo na yung susi. Hanggang wala kang pinipreso, wala. Zero yung demonstration effect ng sinasabi mo.
Ma'am, with regards naman po dun sa ICC, because it has become a very big issue right now, and the President has mentioned it also kanina, will there be a chance that the ICC would have a trial with the President if they insist?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm also reading some legal briefs there, and even the Supreme Court, I think the other day, came out with a statement in regard to that. So we'll see, you know. But the ICC kasi has very cumbersome processes. Madalas kinakamatayan na nung kino-convict nila yung tao na yun, and the president is like 76 years old, and sabi ng ICC they can still investigate from 2016 up to March 2019 when the Philippines withdrew from International Criminal Court. But yes, you know, whatever injustices were done during that time in the fight against drugs, I've repeatedly mentioned that let us deal with it. And those people who, in fact, were participant in these heinous crimes, whether they policemen or whoever they are, barangay people, throw them to jail. And that's how to deal with criminals, you know. Make them suffer, make it painful for them so they don't repeat. Diba?
Ma'am, sa lahat po ng mga napag-usapan natin sa 3 oras na Sona ng Pangulo kanina, sa mga may plano pong tumakbo bilang Pangulo, ano po ang message nyo sa kanila? Because ang election, pag-kurap natin, nandiyan na ang May 2022. Ano po ang message nyo sa mga gustong maging Pangulo ng bansa natin?
Sana pangunahan nila ang constitutional reform kasi kapag ang istruktura ay hindi mo pinago, magpapalit-palit ka lang ng mukha. So, sana palitan natin ang ating istruktura, ang ating electoral system, you know. We will let's move to a parliamentary system para hindi watak-watak yung political party system mo. Ang dami ng mga kandidato nagpromesa, hindi naman nila magagawa yung pinopromesa nila kasi wala namang political party who will realize this in the Congress, di ba? Yun ang realidad talaga eh. Pag inalis mo yung political party between the governor and the governed, where are we? No? Yeah, sana isakatuparan nila yung antagal ng nabinbin na constitutional reform. Nagsawa na akong kaka-appear dyan sa committee hearings, no? And make it happen because the 1987 Constitution really introduced all the change to our economic growth. Lahat ng kanikala nilagay natin doon.
Wow. Ma'am, final question. What do you respect most about the president? Because I wouldn't even ask you what you like about him because our president is an acquired taste. But what do you respect most about the president?
To be fair to him, no, because I often listen to his late night perorations. I think in the beginning he thought as mayor of Davao for 22 years that he could just migrate his experience in Davao to the bigger Republic of the Philippines. And he was sorely disappointed that he could not, that there were too many moving parts.
Yes,
I'm sure
he mentioned that also
several times, di ba? His pragmatism is even in foreign policy is something that is acceptable to me because there is no alternative. But people had chastised him for it, and they, as you said, yung mga iba, magyera, mga salita lang naman ito. But I'm sure pag ginawa mo silang bala ng kanyon, magagalit din sila. No? It doesn't work that way. No? It doesn't work that way. So, yung sinabi mo na hindi na siya nagsabi ng masamang salita nitong last Sona niya at mabuti naman, pwede naman pala niyang kontrolin ang sarili niya kung gusto niya. And let us raise the bar of our leadership next time. No, I'm glad there are very young people who are gunning for the national position. Si Sara Duterte, si Isko Moreno, si Manny Pacquiao, or whoever. And I like young people because they are less likely to be bigots and they are more likely to change their minds.
Okay. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your time. Na alam ko na medyo pagod na kayo dahil galing pa kayo ng Tagaytay. This has been a very, very good eye-opener. Thank you so much. I
Thank
have
you so
learned. So
much,
para ako
Peter.
nakaupo sa classroom, ma'am, asking my questions and learning so much from you. I wish I had you as my teacher.
Sige, mag-sit-in ka sa mga klase ko.
Oh, sure, ma'am. Sure, sure.
Sige,
Thank you so much, ma'am. And
Thank you.
have a
and
good
night.
rest. God bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Dr. Clarita Carlos. Makikita po natin na nanggaling sa isang scholar ang lahat ng sinabi niya tungkol sa, kasi hindi niya po napanood ang Sona. So I was leading her to questions on how, what I have seen and what she needs to hear para po magkaroon siya ng point of view sa Sona. Alam ko po marami akong hindi nabanggit dahil napakahaba po at napakarami na nasabi kanina, but I wish I touched on the important things that the President said kanina. Ako naman po bilang it is no question that I support this President. One thing I noticed about him was the President did not really talk about himself. He actually hates talking about himself. He talked about the people. His dream for the people, pero sinabi nga ni Dr. Carlos kanina, na sinabi rin ng Pangulo kanina na hindi ganun kadali ang naging transition for him from being a mayor to becoming a president. And he even reiterated kanina na akala niya yung war on drugs sa lalabanan niya ay parang yung doon lang sa loob ng Davao City where he could easily deal with those drug dealers, the drug pushers, the drug peddlers, and get rid of them. Because the Philippines is a very big country at hiwa-hiwalay po tayo, hindi tayo landlocked. At kahit landlocked tayo, mahirap po talagang kalaban ang mga taong gahaman. And one thing that I really admire about our president is his selfless and patriotism. It was very evident, and his candidness was really amusing for me. He makes everybody become human beings. Because can you imagine at the latter part of his speech, he said, naiihina daw siya. At I'm sure daw naiihina lahat ng tao sa loob ng Congress kasi magtatatlong oras siya nagsasalita. And it was for me, it was so funny because beautiful women were in gowns. Of course, they don't want people to picture them doing the business. And that was so amusing for me because the president just, ginawang tao, lahat ng tao doon sa loob ng Kongreso. Kagaya ng pagtawag niya sa sarili niya bilang isang ordinaryong tao at Pilipino. We share different opinions. Marami ang ayaw sa Pangulo dahil kagaya na sinabi ko, he is an acquired taste. But we have to look at what he's done for our country. He may not have given everything that he's promised, but he's given us an ample change. And 6 years is not enough to change the system that we have. At kagaya nga sinabi ni Dr. Clarita Carlos kanina, kailangan natin ang magbago ng isang konstitusyon, magbago ng sistema ng gobyerno ay hindi madali. Pinangako rin po niya na magiging federal government tayo. Did not happen. Probably, it's really, really hard to do it rather than just think it and say it. And of course, the opposition did not help na talagang sa Senado, hinaharang ang constitutional change at ang ratification nito. And of course, hindi nag-iisa ang Pangulo sa pagpapatakbo ng ating bansa. Meron tayong mga senador, meron tayong mga congressmen na kasama niya dapat sa pagtataguyod ng ating bansa. But as it is, nasa kamay po natin. Huling Sona na po ng Pangulo ang nangyari kanina. I was quite emotional watching him because yun yung reality na tapos na siya next year, tapos na ang pagpapalakad niya ng ating bansa next year. That I hope that we'll put in our hands the leaders that we are going to have in 2022. Let us choose the ones who are really going to give us change, na magpapatuloy ng mga sinimulan ni Pangulong Duterte. People will tell us, especially ang opposition, sasabihin nila na wala namang kwenta ang Pangulo, na hindi niya ginawa ang lahat ng kanyang pinangako. Come on. If you want perfection, do good in this world, then get to heaven, because it is only in heaven where perfection is. Kagaya po na lagi nating tatandaan, iisa lang ang bayan na dapat nating alagaan, kaya't bago ang ano paman, bago ang sarili, Pilipinas muna. Gandang gabi po.